What is up, guys? A long time no see. So now we'll do the logical experiential tools. So it is on my website. We'll do the 4 next video are gonna be a little more, a lot of content actually, but it's more kind of me, kind of trying to be construct aware, kind of going into the big words of kind of a realm. It's more the experiential in thinking and our tools, in my sense, how humans evolve and all that. I'm gonna go to words that are very important actually in our process and how we come to understand the world, understand each other, and etc. So it's more in that kind of lens. And in this series we'll also do the feeling experiential too. And after we'll do the Trinity, more the transcendental, more the abstract Trinity of the feeling and the thinking, kind of being more around those kind of decider in a way. Kind of see them as a realm, it's more like the realm of thinking. It still, it still is with the feeling, it still is with other factions, but it's still more universally, it's more in that kind of block or realms or levels, you can say. So we can start with objectivity. It's more like the shared external. It's unbiased, it's without bias, without subjectivity. But objective is not the most optimal word to use in a lot of contexts. Like objective personality is like, objective is not the most proper form to use it in that case. Sometimes it's better to say universal, sometimes it's better to say symbolic, sometimes it's better to say truth actually instead of objectivity. Sometimes it's better to say external, sometimes it's actually better to say transcendental. Like people have not a good vocabulary in my sense to be very precise about something, and that's why I've already developed a vocabulary for myself that I try to match as much as possible to others' conception, others' worldview. Kind of bring something that can make people learn the distinction between distinction. So yeah, subjectivity, impartial, without subjectivity. Universal is more, external. It's more ST in a way. It's more the bottom of the pyramid. It's more like accounting for the multiplicity that is impartial. It's really like partial. So you can see it's more play-like because it's not, it's not an account for subjectivity. While other words will account for that in some type of fashion. So it's more ST and OED. The shared, impartial, external, precise, It's also kind of precise, you can say. Kind of precise. And you cannot argue in a way. It's like without subjectivity. And because it's shared and external, it's like you cannot really argue. That's the thing, that's the objectivity there. I guess I can go to the truth, because in some sense objectivity has a lot of, it's really, OED, ST, by definition will be more T or SE, while truth is more TI, MI kind of fashion, you can see, almost, or SI. It's more like matching with reality in a way. It's like objectivity is really like, okay, the shared external that is true, but the truth in of itself is more like, okay, I'm encountering reality in front of me. It's more like a personal kind of, okay, I'm encountering this reality right there. So, and it's more a world of realms, I would say. Like objectivity is more like, okay, that's the thing. While the truth will be more abstract in a way, that it will notice, okay, that's the truth. It will be more aware of the transcendental aspect, or the subjectivity, you can say. And the subjectivity will be more abstract. And more aware of realms will be more like, okay, my universal truth, my personal truth, my exterior truth. And you can argue that the the exterior truth is objectivity actually, but the personal truth will be something else, universal truth something else, etc., etc. The social truth, you can see the social truth too, etc., etc. So matching of some kind of reality, some kind of realms, they're figures of truth, and it's more transcendental, it's more subjective, it's more abstract. So it's more subjective also. You can put so oftentimes I would say it's more MT ST OIEI. Some kind of fashion, oftentimes. Often see people in the TI axis talk about the truth, and people that are more super block bang people that would talk about the truth. More intuitive also, I would say. While objective is more ST, ground, earth-like. Science is a process, it's science, I think people, most are aware of it. Most people kind of conflict those two, and they think that their own opinion is the science, or their own objective, what they think is the truth is the science, but science is actually more a tracking process. It's really about the tracking and the process, and most people will not be good at it. They will interfere with their biases, they will mistake figures of truth, but they will be with biases. They will not respect objectivity in a way, they will be biased, most people. The purpose, science has some kind of purpose, and people have to be aware of that the tracking has a purpose. So you have to be aware of that purpose, that telos, or it will kind of mistake itself, like I said, not in the right figure of truth, with subjectivity, and not respect the process and the tracking, let's say. So the method and the experimentation most likely will fail. But science is really about the process of hypothesis, experimentation, the right conclusion, and building upon itself with the years, building upon itself. And it has to be systematic, as a structure, being aware of the matrix, the axiom, the taxonomy, what kind of test, the building blocks, the structure, with that, being aware of that, because it's systematic, you can see it's kind of pretty much the word process. The systematic, like the structure, the process, aware of the matrix, the axiom. So it's really aware of the template that the science is using, that to arrive at the objectivity or the truth. So systematic, in a sense, has to be privileged in the science for it to truly work and build upon itself. And critical in reason, it's more that something that is kind of cohesive and respect the domain of reason, and the critics in the sense that it will kind of be subject to an assessment that is radical. The assessment is so radical that it has to respect the domain of reason, and for it kind of cut the bullshit that everything is clean cut and reasonable, and that's the reasonable for what it is worth, like really to know the worth of it with the domain of reason, and for it to be critical, it's more like subject to, it's more like not judgment, but I guess an assessment. Assessment, you can say it's somewhat a judgment, but it's more like subject to critic, and the critic itself will be some kind of axiom, some kind of matrix that the own person is using in his critical thoughts to arrive at something that respect the domain. Domain, I put it there, the domain of thinking and reasoning. Reasoning in your own mind kind of coming with your own structure of systematic, kind of trying to piece it together, induction, deduction, logic, top down, bottom up, those kind of faction or figures of truth, kind of using in a way all I talk about, kind of arrive at the domain of reason. And we all have our different processes, depending on number types and all that. So some people will be very good at it, some people not so much. Some people might use a little too much of that, or just too much of that. Like me, I would use too much of that, I would say, of domain, of levels and all that. But I would have trouble being that critical actually. Like I will do the reason, I will do the cohesion, the domain. The subject to critic at the radical fashion, in a precise format, I might have trouble to do with that. And we all have our own difficulty depending on which kind of words or in the domain of reason or thinking or whatever. And accountability, let's say it's more a social two thing. And I mean, some people might not believe social or true. For what I saw, social tree or the specialized coin or the meta coin, I like to say, it's more process oriented. Like the science and the systematic, social tree will pretty much be kind of, they will have to be, not they have, but they're responsible for that, I would say. While accountability is more something the two are more aware. In the external, I would say, like with objectivity in some sense, even though they are blind to some aspect of it, and the tree too, actually. But they all have their own struggle, I would say. But it's more like actions, and the responsibility is more something the two will have. That, okay, the accountability, they will not notice it in the system or in the tracking process, and they are not. It's more like a lot of things that will make itself known, but they will not know the tracking in some sense. But they go with the outcomes. So the outcomes is really how the accountability can be built upon itself with the science. So actually both social are kind of necessary in some sense. But yeah, accountability is just to say to your track record, you know the outcomes. Can have a responsibility of your own action, and you test it in the real world, and you have a feedback. It's more like a feedback in some sense. They didn't write the feedback. So yeah, that's my 6 words for the experiential thinking tool. And I hope you made the distinction. Try to do this exercise. I find it pretty resourceful, kind of getting more presence in your conception and how they relate to each other and all that, and relating it to personality. So yeah, thanks for watching.